there's nothing like a little strangling to get the blood flowing, am I right? The Umbrella Academy.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses.
Fun fact, November is coming up, and that means it is almost Strangulation Awareness Month. This episode, we are going to be talking a lot about strangulation, asphyxiation, how to use that to kill people. Keep in mind that one of the most common ways of domestic violence outside of physically hitting somebody is strangulation. So this is going to be a little bit of a delicate topic that we're talking about, but it's all for writing. It's all to help you build interesting characters, interesting deaths in your story. So just like the rest of this month, just keep in mind the topic of conversation that we have going today.
We're going to make it as fun as possible. Like she mentioned, strangulation, asphyxiation, and hypoxia are all more or less synonymous, and that is the airflow or the oxygen being cut off from the body, and that causing bad things to happen to the body. There are two basic ways for this to happen. There is the air itself is bad. You're trying to breathe in water or poisonous gases, that kind of thing. And there is something is blocking the passage. There's a pillow over the face, or there's anaphylactic shock closes the throat, something like that.
So with the bad air and bad gases, if you're talking in kind of a magical world in a magical sense, you can have miasmas or toxic gases, magic spells that create a bubble of toxicity that can kill someone by cutting off their supply of oxygen.
Yeah, almost every magic system that comes to mind has a toxic cloud or something similar type spell. Included in this would be something that damages the lungs over a long period of time. That would be something like smoking different kinds of substances, puts tar and other gunk in the lungs, and makes it so that they can't absorb the oxygen and send it to the rest of the body. It becomes harder and harder to do the breathing thing.
And something like asbestos can also do this over a long period of time. So while this may not be technically classified as asphyxiation as a manner of death, it falls into a similar category because of the damage it does to the lungs, and the effects of it can be similar to this bad air gases kind of death.
If you're writing something that takes place maybe around or during World War I, World War II, gas chambers and mustard gas, these types of bad air contaminants often have that heavy metal we talked about earlier this month and make it so that you can't get enough oxygen.
One way that some death row executions take place is through the use of nitrogen hypoxia. You can also have, I believe it's helium hypoxia. And then a common way to go about this for suicides is the CO2 hypoxia with the car exhaust.
Nitrogen does tend to be something that people assume is a slightly gentler way to go because the body has an easier time detecting CO2 than it does nitrogen.
If I remember right, it's because the body is trained to detect CO2, not necessarily to detect oxygen levels. So long as the levels of CO2 don't get too high, anything else is just like, whatever.
And we will also put drowning in this category. There's a lot of information on drowning out there. It could have been an episode in its own right if this month were twice as long. But we're going to throw this in there of you're breathing in the wrong thing and it's causing the body to malfunction.
Now, the type of asphyxiation that you're more likely to come across in writing, in storytelling, is going to be the strangulation category. Because more often than not in your stories, someone is killing someone else. And strangulation is a really easy way to do that. And there are a couple of different ways this happens.
The first way is to muffle the mouth. Even though the body is functioning normally, it doesn't have access. So that's something like putting a pillow over their face as they're sleeping, or something I see that happens incorrectly a lot in action and thrillers is the character's nose is broken, and then the good guy doesn't want him talking, so they put duct tape over his mouth. Now he has no way to breathe.
The other common route of a strangulation that you'll hear more often is cutting off the throat. So this can be done using your hands, which we talked about in our melee hand-to-hand combat episode. Another common way is by using a garrote. This can be made of anything. It's basically just a device, small wire or thread or rope or whatever, wrapped around the neck and pulled tight.
If it's a public execution kind of thing, hanging would fall into this category. I would also throw in that this would be how Darth Vader disciplines his troops. He uses the Force with his hands and then just strangles them from afar.
And then if you want to get more the body is working against itself form of strangulation, this is where you have those allergens, the peanuts, the shellfish allergies that physically close up the throat because of the allergic reaction that's happening.
So what happens in the body that makes it so not having oxygen is a bad idea?
Your entire body needs oxygen to function. Your blood depends on oxygen. All of the organs depend on oxygen. Your brain depends on oxygen. It's not just a lack of air to the lungs, but it's the air that the lungs provides to that blood that is necessary for your body to continue to function.
So anything like cutting off the windpipe stops your body from inhaling, or cutting off the jugular stops the body from carrying that oxygen from your lungs to the brain. So the blood is very important, and if you stop carrying blood to certain body parts, it'll die off. You do have a little bit more time than, say, stabbing somebody. You generally will have minimum 30 seconds, and this is assuming it's somebody in a nursing home, up to about 3 minutes. The rule tends to be 3 minutes for air, 3 days for water, 3 weeks for food.
And this, keep in mind, is before someone passes out, not necessarily before they die. It can take up to 10 minutes to kill somebody through a manual strangulation. Now, the kind of people that use these methods to kill someone are fairly specific, especially with the strangulation and the closing off the throat, closing off the mouth. This is very common in partner-to-partner domestic abuse, and it rarely happens just once. A lot of the times you will have a repeated act of strangling somebody until they pass out, and then the person will wake up and the partner will act as if nothing happened.
This is also a good one if your victim is female. We talked about poisons being a thing that females use in order to be a perpetrator. If they're a victim, this is a good one to consider, because females are about 6 times as likely to be victims of strangulation as compared to men.
When choosing to kill someone in your books through strangulation, it is a very intimate way of killing someone because you have to be right there doing it. You have that physical contact. You can see the light go out in their eyes. And again, it takes a relatively long time to actually manually strangle somebody.
That means there's a lot of time to enjoy the panic as the light just dims from their eyes.
I mean, sure. Now, I do want to mention that this process can be sped up a little bit, that manual strangulation, if you do something to damage the bones and everything inside the neck. If you break the hyoid bone, or if the windpipe or whatever gets punctured, anything in there gets damaged, it can speed up the process so it won't take the full several minutes. But you generally have to have either a lot of strength and rage behind it, or somebody very deliberately doing that.
And as far as the mentality of the killer, this particular type, when it comes to serial killers, goes often hand in hand with SA. And this could be because, again, a lot of the victims tend to be female, or it could be that weird intimacy that happens when you strangle somebody.
As for the historical context behind all of the types of asphyxiation, when it comes to gases, you will have a lot of use in that in wartime. You can look at the mustard gases of World War I, the gas chambers of World War II. and how they could be used to kill so many people at the same time by cutting off their oxygen.
If you're writing fantasy or perhaps historical fiction, bad air tended to be the thing that they blamed for a lot of illnesses, especially contagious illnesses. That's why the plague doctors had those weird beak type things, not only to intimidate the bad air and bad spirits in the air, but to fill it with things like vinegar and lavender and other things that have very potent smells, so they couldn't smell the bad air and it would keep them safe.
Also, if you're looking for more of your serial killer type, you can look at examples such as the Chicago Strangler, who is believed to have about 75 victims between 1999 and 2018. Or further back, the Boston Strangler had between 11 to 13 victims in the early 60s. And there are more examples beyond them.
When I was looking up weird deaths for our bonus episode, one that popped up was Attila the Hun. We're going to put him in this one because he actually reportedly died on his wedding night from choking on a nosebleed.
Which wedding night?
His last one, I assume, because that's how he died. There are all sorts of conspiracy theories about this. Obviously, this is a lot of fun to theorize about. But this one, we're also going to slide into the asphyxiation because he breathed in his own blood and died that way.
Because there are so many different kinds of asphyxiation, so many different ways that it could be used, this is something you really can use broadly within your story. Each instance can be different, but first you just have to.
Right, selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.